Inside the Huddle is sponsored by Ohio Production Paint and Assembly Corporation. For your industrial painting needs, call OPAC at 419-582-2761 or visit them at 18 East Main Street in Osgood.
Hey readers and followers, we are in week 4 of the high school football season. I'm Jake Dowling from the Union Leader. This is Seth Kinker from the Minster Community Post, and we are in week 4 of the Inside the Huddle preview. Pretty good stuff this week. It seems like as the season goes on, more and more storylines kind of form, and there's just more to talk about. And that's kind of the beauty of football. And we're getting into that range where teams this week have a deadline to submit whether they want to go to the postseason or not. So that brings another storyline ahead of us. So St. Mary's will play Van Wert. They will travel to 3-0 Van Wert this week. It's their first road game since week 1. Minster will play Delphos St. John's, and then New Bremen will play undefeated, right? Coldwater.
Yep,
so a lot to talk about. We'll start with Minster. What do you got this week for the Wildcats?
So Minster, they fell 0-3. They lost to St. Henry 20-7. They played Delphos again, like you said, this week. So for Minster, one of the things I've been kind of focusing on when talking to head coach Garen Stokes each week is kind of like growing pains. We know that they have lost all those starters. So for me, I've been kind of focused on the positives because there have been positives, like you said, as we're over midway through this shortened pandemic season, and we're starting to see some things, some growth from these units. Offensively, they had more total yards, 287 to 277 over St. Henry. They had more first downs, 15-10, and they had more rushing yards. Connor Albers led the team with 50 yards. Johnny Nixon went 16 for 25, threw for 217 yards, had a touchdown, but 2 picks. 5 guys that were spreading the ball around. They had 3 guys had 3 passes led by Austin Wellman for 75 yards, and then Jack Coney also had 51 yards and a touchdown as well. Defensively, we know that's kind of been an area that definitely needs to improve. They gave up 15 total yards 2 weeks ago and 42 points in the first half against Coldwater. This week this most recent week they gave up 277 total yards and only 21 points in the half. So there is an improvement there. Adam Kettner and Connor Albers led the team with tackles defensively. Nathan Bergman also picked up an interception. And for Stokes, talking to head coach Stokes, one of the things that I asked, I said, well, we've seen kind of improvement from this defense from kind of now from week 1 until now. And he said he's starting to see glimpses. I mean, clearly they still have a lot of work to do, but he's starting to see some of the things that they've been harping on, just getting to the ball quicker and just having that effort and passion, and he's starting to see some of that. But still, it's kind of about getting all 11 guys on the same page and all 11 guys winning a rep, which is something that they haven't done. He said they haven't done in any of the games thus far. So that's kind of still a continued focus for that defense moving forward. This week they play against Delphos, and it's kind of the same. We talked about their preview last week in Bremen. It's a true spread team, so Minster does run some variations of the spread, but they kind of sprinkle in a tight end a little bit more. But for Delphos, they get a lot wider, a lot more 3x1 and 2x2 true spread formations. So the secondary is going to have to be stout. I mean, it's going to be the same as we talked about with New Bremen. You saw them kind of shut them down saw them shut down Delphos' spread game, which is what we'll touch on next. But the secondary is going to have to be continued to be stout, and that'll be the key there for shutting down Delphos.
So for St. Mary's, obviously, like I said, they traveled to Van Wert, and last week, kind of the same struggles is consistency on the offensive side of the ball. They still have not scored a single point in the first half of this season. They got all their points in the fourth quarter and the 2 periods of overtime last week, and that kind of put them in a little bit of a hole. They lost 27-20 in double overtime to the Titans. It was a really good game, and the offense really clicked. They got their running game going, and they picked up a lot of rushing yards. I mean, they had 369 total yards of offense, 226 of it was through the ground, 5.2 yards per carry, and then they had 23 first downs. So they were able to move the ball again, but they just weren't able to finish. That was something that Fry and I had talked about a couple times last week. We talked about it again on Friday and then again on Tuesday when we had talked for our preview. So that's pretty much where this offense is right now, is they just need to be able to finish drives and get some points there in that first half. So last week, something that Fry and I have talked about before, we've used this term a lot, is you're putting out one fire just for another one to start. That's kind of how the St. Mary's offense has been so far this season, where you get the running game going, but then another fire starts up, and that was penalties. They had 7 penalties for 79 yards, and OG had 7 penalties as well, but their penalties didn't kill their offensive drives like St. Mary's did. So for example, their second offensive drive of the game, St. Mary's drove all the way down to OG's 26-yard line, but then they were stalled. They had back-to-back penalties. They ended up having to punt on that drive, came away with no points. The final drive of the first half, they were started on their own 15-yard line, didn't really have a whole lot of momentum, got all the way to OG's 31 in 11 plays, eventually got down to the 5-yard line, but a big penalty pushed them back, and they attempted that 41-yard field goal, which ended up being short and wide, and that pretty much ended the first half. Yeah. So those penalties pretty much killed the drives there on those two offensive possessions. They turned those into points. Let's say they turn them into a touchdown and a field goal. It's 10-7 instead of a 7, or 10-6 actually, instead of a 6-0 halftime score. Maybe if they make their run there in that fourth quarter, they don't even go to overtime, or they don't even go to double overtime. So, their offense really has to get going, and there's just a lack of consistency, and that's what he was saying. But it was kind of hard last week because they lost a fullback, Ross Henschen. He was out, so they used Aiden Hinkle a little bit, but he's still kind of getting his feet under him. So they went more with the outside runs. That's where Fry thought that he could attack them the most, was on the outside. We saw that a lot in the overtime periods too. So they got those going. The seniors, Dylan Troglin and Ethan Wedding, had some good games. They had their first 100-plus rushing yards of the season, but they just couldn't finish it at the end. 4th and goal from the 5-yard line. They tried to throw it or toss it outside to Ethan. And they had a good seal block there on the outside, but he cut it back in, and they got stonewalled pretty much there. Instead of taking it outside, they might have been able to score there. But their outside runs gave them some good blemishes, some good looks there, but they just weren't able to put it all together, piece it all together. One thing that Friday kind of pointed out was, a lot of these players, like Wedding, like Troglin, they're seniors this year. And they have the experience because they were varsity players last year, but they weren't starters per se. They were role players. So one thing that he had pointed out was this year they're looking for these guys to be, taking on a lot of the offense. So they're not role players this year. So they're still kind of getting acclimated to that, which makes a lot of sense, especially when you lose the preseason that you lost and the 7-on-7s, the scrimmages, all that kind of stuff. You're in week 1 of the season, maybe week 2 of the season, right. But right now, realistically, you're in week 4. Right. So they're looking for that level of consistency. One thing that Fry said to get that level of consistency is to simplify things. And I think that's the kind of approach that Fry took last year. Was after they lost to OG, they were 1-2. He wanted to simplify things because they had that level of consistency that they struggled with. So they played week 4 against Van Wert at home. There's a lot of pressure. They're home the first game of the new stadium, and they made things simple. They came out with a win. Week 4, that next week, week 5 actually, against Shawnee, Aiden Hinkle comes out. They come out with a win. They get a lot of confidence then, simplifying that game plan. They play Kitten in that shootout game. They win that game. And that gave them a lot of points for the postseason, and then it gave them a lot of confidence then for the final 4 games of the season with a much easier schedule. They pretty much went out that schedule that season. So he's looking to simplify things, especially against a Van Wert team where I think they can run the ball against. They're looking to just simplify that offense to really get the offense going. And we'll see what happens offensively. And they definitely have a chance to score some points, and we'll see what happens there offensively. They play Van Wert, and Van Wert has a very good offense going into this week. They have really put a lot of points up on the opposing teams that they played against, a lot of rushing yards. So they had 55 points against Helena in week 1. Helena's a pretty good team. They're 2-1. Defiance 56 points and a 56-20 win. Defiance is winless than the Walpock, 34-0, and obviously the Redskins are winless. First win for Van Wert last week at Walpock. His first win at Walpock since 2004 for the Cougars. They're led by Owen Treese, who is a senior this year, and it seems like he's been around for forever. I believe he's a 3-sport athlete, football, basketball, and I believe he plays baseball as well. Pretty much great at every sport that he plays in. He's a quarterback, but he's a dual threat. He rushes, he passes. Last year he had 1,945 passing yards, 148 of 243 passing for 18 touchdowns. And then against Walpock, he was 24-27, only had 3 incompletions in that game. 294 yards, touchdown, and then as running back, 12 carries, 68 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So he really, really hurt Walpock. And that's a player that St. Mary's is going to have to look out for. You know, they had Jacob Ball last week against Ottawa Glandorf, and he threw up 222 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. And believe it or not, I mean, Fry was actually happy with that defensive performance. They gave up 294 total yards of offense, but he was happy with, you know, he knows that Ball is going to get his yards, going to get his touchdown passes. So he was happy with the way they played, and really, they played well enough for that offense to win that game. So I think that's the way he was looking at it. It's kind of the same way here. Treese is probably going to get his yards. He's probably going to get his points. It's pretty much the offense. If they can be consistent and put some drives together and finish those drives, they have a chance. It definitely could be a shootout if they can get their act together. Okay. One person to look for other than Treese is Drew Johnson. Drew Johnson has not played St. Mary's from my understanding. He didn't play him last year. He's a player that's been injured. Something that Fry had pointed out was Van Wert, when they play them or when they see them on film, there was always 1 or 2 players or a handful of players that are out due to injury. He said this year Van Wert is healthy, completely healthy, no COVID issues. I mean, Van Wert is the least hardest hit counties in the state and COVID, and with their injuries, they're not injured very often, and they're very healthy. So Drew Johnson's one of those healthy players. He had 7 receptions for 114 yards last week, so he's going to be somebody to look out for St. Mary's. But the good thing is St. Mary's does bring a player back. They lose Ross Henshin in the linebacker position, but they bring back Braden Himmelgarn, a corner. He was suspended the first 2 games of the season with altercation against Bath in that opener. So he is back. That puts a lot of speed in their secondary there. And like I said before, they can move Tanner Howell from the linebacker position out, so they have a lot of speed there on the cornerback position. Or with Himmelgarn back, they can just keep Howell there. You know, he's a tackle machine in that middle linebacker position. So that'll help them defensively. Van Wert offense entering week 3, the stats that from last week entering week 3, they're first in the WBL in passing. They're second in passing offense, first in total offense and scoring offense, and they're first in total defense. But they're 5th in total rush defense. St. Mary's obviously came in last week as the top rushing attack in the league. So we'll see how that matchup plays out. But you know, obviously the story there will be the offense. How does Van Wert offense play against St. Mary's defense? But how does St. Mary's offense, can they get the ball rolling? That simplified game plan, does that really help out for St. Mary's? We'll find out. One thing that Fry had talked about was, you know, the team mentality. You know, with no WBL champion, they're going to go to the playoffs. He had confirmed that they had submitted that they will go to the playoffs. I asked them, you know, kind of like the other sports, like your soccer, like your volleyball, like your basketball, you get so important in the season, if teams don't really have, like the WBL is in their sight or something like that, they'll transition and say, we're going to start focusing on the playoffs. So I asked them, I said, you know, have you had that discussion with your kids where you're going to start to change that focus towards the playoffs? And the thing he told me was, it's one game at a time. And we hear that from sports reporters all the time. It's one game at a time. We're taking, like, you know, a game at a time or a week at a time or whatever. But it's really the case, because the way he looked at it was, with COVID, he never knows what's going to happen. And he said that after Monday's practice, he put up four fingers, and he said, you have 4 games left. 3 in the regular season and the postseason game, at least one postseason game. He said that's what we know that we have on schedule. Of course, COVID could change all that, or the state could change all that in a second, and they don't have any games left, or they only have 1 game left. So he said, you know, take it 1 game at a time. There's no league champion to worry about. There's no league that you're going after, no league title. But there's the postseason. But you don't know if the postseason is going to happen just because of COVID yet, but you know that week 4 is going to happen. Yeah. So what he's doing is taking it 1 game at a time, and what he said was, the beauty of this season, if anything, is because you don't know what's going to happen with the postseason, and if you're going to have more games, or if you're going to be able to add more games after the season's over. The beauty of it is you can focus on that 1 game at a time, because you don't know what's going to be ahead of you. So that's a pretty unique thing. He said it's a lot easier to get his players to focus on that because of that uncertainty.
Yeah.
And we'll see how it turns out. Everything is in front of them. The good thing about this loss is, they have a better record than they did last year. 3 games in, they were 1-2 last year. They're 2-1 this year, but you're not out of the league title. You're not out anything. Yeah. You're not looking to get home field advantage yet because we don't know what the regions look like. There's a lot of uncertainty ahead, but all you know is there's a week 4 game. That's where their focus is. Simplified offensive game plan. That's what Fry's going to take. He's just going to make everything more simplified. We'll see how that turns out in week 4.
Yeah. So now looking at our last matchup, New Bremen, they moved back to the right side of 500. They moved to 2-1 with that win over Delphos, beat them 38-6, and then they take on Coldwater, like you said, 3-0 this week. But first, kind of looking at their game against Delphos, they got back to kind of what they do well, which is running the ball. That's one of the things that, talking to head coach Chris Schmidt leading up to the game, he said we have to get back to what we do well. And they ran for 221 rush yards, 142 of those coming from senior running back Zach Bertkey. And I mean, you don't rush for 229 yards without kind of controlling the line of scrimmage and therefore kind of the tempo of the game, which is when once they can control the tempo of the game at their pace, and it allows them to do what they want to do. They only had to pass, I think Mitchell Hayes only threw for 13 passes that game, so I mean, you don't really have to pass that much when you're running that effectively. For Schmidt, he still wants to see consistency. I mean, I asked him, they scored in every single quarter, and I'm like, so where can you guys still improve? And he said he was still mad. Like he said, we in the first quarter or first half we stalled on a drive, and a key penalty or some errors in execution led to them having to kick a field goal, and so they still could be better. For them, and defensively wise, I mean, the defense responded. They gave up a lot of chunk pass plays last week to Marion Local, and then they were really able to capitalize and shut down a spread offense for Delphos this week. They only allowed 8 rushing yards on the ground and only 155 yard passing yards through the air. They had 3 interceptions. It was Nick Allig, Braden Suchlin, and Kyle Tankman. Nick Allig, he's had an interception every game, a junior defensive back for them that got experience last year. He lettered and saw some playing time and some starts and off the bench. And talking to head coach Chris Schmidt, he said he was just really impressed with the secondary's response. They knew that they had to be better this week after giving up those big chunk plays yesterday. And the thing he was most impressed with was their response as far as just playing within the scheme and playing with their technique, not kind of trying to overextend and do things and trying to make up for maybe like mistakes that they made last week. And once they played within that, they were really able to kind of just play their game, and that interception that Allie got kind of sealed the game for them because that led to a touchdown and then the running clock and led to the win. So for there, it was defensively, and also, I mean, besides the secondary, they've been led all season by linebackers, Bertkey, who plays both ways, and Ben Blickel. And for them, they're 2 senior linebackers who last year they played fast, according to Chris Schmidt. I wasn't here last year, but he said they played fast, and this year they've managed to get even faster. He mentioned a play by Ben Blickel, kind of getting upfield, timing the snap count perfectly, getting in the backfield. But before, maybe as a younger underclassman, he might have just gotten upfield and the play would have been past him. This time, he got in the backfield, recognized they were running, trying to get a jet sweep going, and then timed it. So as soon as the ball carried, got the ball, boom, right on top of it. So for them, I kind of asked him, over halfway through this shortened pandemic season, I said, where has the team kind of made its biggest strides from week 1 until now heading into week 4? And he said, I still don't think we've made that, which is kind of a good indicator. He said, we have some kind of things to fine tune and hone in on as we get closer to the playoffs, but he still thinks this team's best football is in front of them. Kind of looking ahead to Coldwater, their matchup 3-0 this week. They're at the top of the MAC with Marion Local, who's also undefeated. Their offense has put up 21 points, 49 points, and 51 points most recently. They're led by their quarterback, Miles Blassingame. He leads the MAC in rushing. It's just a potent offense that has playmakers pretty much wherever you look at it. Chris Schmidt also said he really liked their running back, Zach McKibben, who's averaging over 8 yards per carry and has 4 touchdowns as well. So it wasn't really about kind of stopping them. He's like, you can't really shut them down completely, but it's about slowing them down and taking away some of those big plays. Alternatively, he said New Bremen offensively needs to do well. Again, set the tone in the running game first, like they did last week against Delphos, but didn't against Marion Local, to kind of have the pace going at their game. And then they also need to be made, in addition to taking away Coldwater's big plays, they know they need to make big plays to get some momentum swinging in their favor. So that does it for New Bremen's matchup against Coldwater.
So yeah, it's another good week. Like I said, a lot of storylines. When I was talking about the playoffs earlier, this is the Thursday, 11:59 p.m. Thursday is when teams can submit if they want to go to the playoffs, and they can cancel that, I think, by the 24th or 21st, I think. And then the 24th then is when the regions will be drawing on Friday. on the 18th, and then on the 24th is when the coaches will vote. So we'll see how everything transpires. There's a lot to get through here in the next week and a half. We'll see how it all turns out. But I'm Jake Dowling from the Evening Leader. Be sure to check out our print edition of the Inside the Huddle. A lot of good stuff there. Obviously, the Minster Community Post and all their coverage. We'll be back, and we'll see you next week. Take care.